Hello everyone, and today we're looking at one of the strangest luxury cars ever created, a machine so bizarre that even in the completely wild world of late 1960s American automobiles, it still looked like something from another dimension. This is the Mohs Ostentatienne Opera Sedan, built in 1967 by the Mohs Seaplane Corporation, and honestly, calling it simply a car feels completely wrong. This thing was more like a rolling luxury experiment designed by somebody who clearly thought ordinary limousines were far too normal. And before we even get into the design, here's the detail that immediately makes this vehicle legendary. Only one single example was ever built. Not a limited production run. Not a handful of prototypes. Just one. Which means the Mohs Opera Sedan is technically rarer than most hypercars, concept cars, and exotic collector vehicles combined. Somewhere along the way, Bruce Mohs basically decided, I'm going to build the strangest luxury coupe in America, and then actually followed through with it. The first thing that hits you when looking at the Mohs is the sheer scale of the thing. Photos don't fully prepare you for how enormous this car really was. With a wheelbase of almost 10 feet, the total length stretched to around 20.5 feet, while the width measured roughly 7.5 feet. To make things even crazier, the vehicle weighed over 2.6 tons, or more than 5,700 pounds. This wasn't just a large car. This was practically a luxury apartment disguised as a coupe. And despite that size, the design somehow tried to look elegant. The front end is dominated by an enormous vertical grille that resembles the entrance of an expensive hotel rather than an automobile. The long, flowing body lines, smooth curves, and dramatic proportions make the car feel halfway between an Art Deco limousine and a futuristic concept vehicle. Honestly, if somebody told you this car appeared in a science fiction movie from the 1960s where wealthy businessmen commute between planets, you'd probably believe it instantly. But the real insanity begins once you notice the rear section. Instead of conventional rear doors or a normal trunk, the Mohs used a massive rear canopy that lifted upward, almost like the hatch of an aircraft. Watching it open looks less like entering a car and more like boarding a private luxury pod. Rear passengers entered through the back of the vehicle beneath this giant opening canopy, which instantly made the Mohs one of the most theatrical luxury cars ever created. And honestly, if you arrived at a hotel in this thing today, people would still stop whatever they were doing just to stare at it. Underneath all that bizarre styling sat a surprisingly serious mechanical platform. The Mohs used a strong ladder-frame chassis construction capable of supporting the enormous body and weight. Suspension setup consisted of an independent torsion bar front suspension and a solid rear axle with leaf springs, which was fairly conventional for heavy American vehicles of the era. Braking came from hydraulic drum brakes on all four wheels, which today sounds mildly terrifying considering how massive the car was. Let's just say stopping distances were probably measured using calendars instead of tape measures. The giant body rode on enormous 20-inch wheels, which were extremely unusual for the 1960s. And these weren't ordinary tires either. The Mohs used nitrogen-filled tires designed to better handle the vehicle's enormous weight. Back then, most cars still used much smaller wheels with huge tire sidewalls, so the Mohs already looked decades ahead of its time simply because of its wheel and tire proportions. Now let's talk about the engines, because this is where things become even more ridiculous. The Mohs Ostentatienne Opera Sedan was available with two different international Harvester 5.8 engines. The first option, known as the Model A setup, used a 304 cubic inch V8, which displaced roughly 5 liters. The second option, and the one most people remember, was the absolutely enormous 549 cubic inch V8, or nearly 9 liters of displacement. And honestly, at that point you're no longer measuring engine size. You're basically measuring geological formations. The larger 549 V8 produced around 250 horsepower at 4,400 revolutions per minute, and while that may not sound shocking by modern standards, you have to remember this engine was designed for massive torque and effortless cruising rather than outright speed. It was paired with a 3-speed automatic transmission driving the rear wheels, delivering smooth and relaxed performance more suited to luxury travel than aggressive driving. Interestingly, the intake system was engineered to accommodate different types of fuel, which added another layer of unusual engineering to an already deeply unconventional automobile. Bruce Mohs clearly wanted this car to feel advanced and adaptable, not just visually different. And despite weighing nearly 3 tons, the Mohs reportedly had a top speed of approximately 115 miles per hour, which honestly sounds slightly terrifying. Looking at the sheer size of this thing, combined with drum brakes and 1960s suspension technology, driving it flat out must have felt like piloting a luxury cruise ship through a tornado. But performance was never the main goal here. The Mohs was designed around exclusivity, comfort, and spectacle. The interior focused heavily on the passenger luxury, especially for rear occupants. Plush upholstery, deep carpeting, custom trim, and extravagant materials turned the cabin into something closer to a private lounge than a conventional automobile. This wasn't a driver's car. It was a car for somebody who wanted to arrive somewhere looking more important than everyone else in the parking lot combined. And perhaps the most fascinating thing about the Mohs is that underneath all the craziness, some of Bruce Mohs' ideas were actually surprisingly forward-thinking. The body panels were made from durable materials like stainless steel and aluminum. Many sections were designed to be removable or replaceable, and the emphasis on custom luxury experiences feels strangely modern today. In some ways, the Mohs predicted the ultra-exclusive, hand-built luxury cars we now see from companies like Rolls-Royce or modern coach builders. It just did it with the subtlety of a man wearing a diamond-covered tuxedo while driving a spaceship. Unfortunately, the world simply wasn't ready for something this unusual. At a price of roughly $19,600 in 1967, the Mohs was outrageously expensive. Adjusted for inflation today, that equals well over $180,000, placing it deep into exotic luxury territory. Convincing wealthy buyers to choose this bizarre experimental coupe over a Cadillac or Rolls-Royce was nearly impossible, no matter how futuristic or exclusive it looked. So production ended almost immediately. Only one example survived, instantly turning the Mohs Opera Sedan into one of the rarest and most mysterious American luxury cars ever created. And honestly, maybe that's exactly how this car was supposed to exist. Not as mass transportation, but as a rolling statement that somebody dared to build simply because they could. Because the Mohs doesn't feel like a normal automobile. It feels like imagination on wheels, a machine built without compromise, without focus groups, and without anyone stepping into the room to say, "Bruce, maybe we should calm down a little." And thankfully, nobody did. And if you enjoy discovering bizarre, forgotten vehicles like this, strange machines that feel halfway between engineering and science fiction, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because there are many more incredible automotive experiments waiting ahead.